the first summer you spend out here, you are really subjected to hot, dry wind. It's literally like somebody has a hairdryer on you for the whole summer.
Welcome to the Desert Lady Diaries podcast, conversations with women who have found their home in the Mojave Desert. I'm Dawn Davis, and this is episode 153. Find out more about the podcast at desertladydiaries.com and engage with the guests, with other listeners, or me on Facebook and Instagram at Desert Lady Diaries. Every day, you can find Rose Cefalu obsessing over her iPhone photos and over-posting on Instagram. In her spare time, she thinks about traveling, printing imagery, making candles, and mixing new colors. In 2019, Rose launched a Cyanotype workshop to get her hands dirty again and reintroduce this vintage art form to a new audience interested in becoming skilled with alternative photographic processes. She is also producing award-winning content at a variety of outlets. Currently, Rose is the photography director at Emmy Magazine, and you can find her work at rosecefaluphoto.com. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Dawn. Thanks for having me.
Sure. What was your first experience with any kind of desert?
Well, I was born and raised in San Francisco in the Bay Area. So my first experience with the desert was camping with my friends back in the mid-90s. It was enchanting and fun, and we were young, and it was the first time I'd ever seen the park or a coyote in the wild. And it was great. We were there to have a good time. There was 10 of us, and we had tents, and we were over at Black Rock Campground, and it was just a good time. And going to the park was my first experience with Joshua Tree National Park. And I remember it definitely had an impact. I think there were later times where I explored the park that were more impactful, but I was really surprised at how much I enjoyed the scenery. And I think we saw a tortoise on the first visit and the coyote, which of course, being mid-20s at that point in the 90s, I think we tried to feed it, which I know better now.
Shame.
I know, shame. Of course, you want to be friends with them at that point.
Sure,
You're like,
yeah.
oh, look, it's a wild animal. I want to be its friend.
Yeah.
Like I said, I know better now, but it was great. And then I came back for a photo shoot. I produced a lot of shoots in Los Angeles, and I came back for a photo shoot in the park, and that really, really, really grabbed me then. It was just the big wide open spaces. And then I came back for another shoot when I was working at some car magazines, and we used to shoot on Pipes Canyon, and we'd have a photographer hanging off the back of a truck and another car that we were photographing going like 10 miles an hour, and we were running a slow shutter. So it looked like he was going 60 miles an hour, and there was no one around. Like literally, we would not see a car all day. And we stayed at the motel before it was, hip and trendy. And it was pretty much a flea bag hotel, and Pappy and Harriet's was desolate, and it was fun. It's still fun now, but it was a different experience. And, there were homestead cabins all over the place that weren't redone. And you could kind of just walk around and explore the desert, which you still can explore the desert, but it was different. It was different. And I think, like so many people, it's just such an enchanting, beautiful, wild place. And I thought it would be such a great place to live. And then I bought a house here in 2017, and I moved here. And boy, was I in for a wake-up call. I mean, Mother Nature really, really, really gets to you. You go from living in Los Angeles to living in Joshua Tree, and I mean, the weather is just so different. You're 2.5 hours outside of Los Angeles. And I grew up in the Bay Area. I'm very seasoned in seasons, and used to rain and wind and fog. But this altitude, 3,500 feet, and when those clouds come in and the water comes down, and you get things like hail and snow, and it's eye-opening. And literally being in the middle of the wilderness. I mean, coyotes roaming your property, dead bunnies, live bunnies, small animals, rats. I mean, my first experience with rats was just insane.
Did they eat your car wires?
They got in my car and they made a nest, but they did not eat the wires. So I'm hoping maybe they just weren't as tasty as somebody else's wires.
And for somebody listening, that's a real thing, right? There are many things that people do to avoid that situation. And I think sometimes the further out you are from like a busier like downtown area, like knock on wood, I've never had that issue here in downtown Joshua Tree. But folks that seem to live a little further out seem to have that issue where I guess they like the warmth of the engine once it's shut off. So especially at night, if they get in there and then they start building their nest for the heat, and then there's something about the coating on the wires that is, like you say, very tasty to them. And then they chew them. And then I can't say how many posts I've seen about rats chewed my wires. What do I do? Or does this happen all the time? And everybody's got a different method of poison is the one that gets the most response because of the ecosystem. You know, you poison the little rats and then they go out and a coyote eats them. And then the coyote ingests the poison or the owls ingest the poison. It's just a bad scene. But a lot of people use like that water bucket method where they drop in the bucket and then they take them out and, you know, bury them somewhere or put them somewhere for the snakes to eat. I don't know. And then there's the electronic methods, turning on talk radio or all kinds of things. Was there anything that you used in particular once you discovered that nest that you were like, uh-oh, I better do this to avoid this?
Well, funny that you mentioned that because I was doing a garage conversion. And that's really when we went away for the weekend, my boyfriend and I, and we came back and we noticed that there was rat poop all over the garage. And I was like, wow, I think we've got a problem here. I think we've got rats. And obviously I went to Home Depot, consulted with the Home Depot experts and looked online on Nextdoor, and everyone said electric rat traps. You're not poisoning the environment. It's fairly humane, or you could trap them and release them. So I went for the electric rat trap. I was like, okay, let's not mess around here. I want them done. I don't want them screaming. I don't want to hurt anyone. I don't want to poison the environment. So I ordered one from Amazon and it came and we set it all up, put a walnut in the back of it. Apparently they just walk in, they get zapped and they go. And we set it up. And when the light turns green, it means you've caught a rat. And the first day, nothing. Light was red. Second day, Matt goes, oh, hey, honey, the light's green. I was like, oh my God, did we catch it? And he goes, yes. And he, being from the desert, he opens it up, turns it off, plops it out on his hand and shows it to me on his hand. And I'm like, horrified that he just puts a rat in his hand. And I look at it and I'm shocked because it's actually really beautiful. It's a beautiful rat. And then he turns it over. He goes, oh, it's a mama. I go, oh God. And then of course I'm like, I hear the violins playing in my head and it's like a Disney film. I'm like, I just killed a mother. I'm like, I can't believe I just killed a mama rat. I go, that means there's babies. And so he goes, yep. He goes, we better set the trap again. I'm like, I'm devastated. I just killed some baby rat's mother.
Aw.
I'm traumatized, right? I go, we've got to bury her somewhere. I feel horrible now. And I was making cyanotypes. When I first moved out here in 2017, I thought I'd get back to my roots of photography and start doing alternative processes, which is this technique, which I'll tell you about more anyways. I had some paper coated and ready to go. And I said, well, I'm going to do an homage to this rat. And I made a sun print of her. So I put her body on the paper. Aww. And I made a print of her and put her in the sun. So I've got actually, I have it right here. I can show it to you. I made this beautiful print of this rat. So I've sort of memorialized her and I gave her a little burial in my backyard. We didn't catch any more in the trap, but we did find the rat, the baby rats. And I was like, we can't kill them. We can't. So I made Matt catch them with a piece of Tupperware and throw them into the field next door. Ironically, a snake showed up the next day with a big fat belly. So I really learned about the circle of life really fast. I'm hoping at least I saved one rat's life.
That one got away.
Yeah,
the snake was too full.
Everything has a place here. I just didn't want to live with them. So
right. Yeah. No, and that's understandable. Exactly. Yeah. So in the process of doing these photo shoots and buying this, I mean, what was the deciding factor of I'm going to buy a place here?
Part of it was the enchantment of the desert and challenging myself. Can I do this? Can I live in the desert? So I thought, you know what? I I love Los Angeles, but I didn't see it as my home. I lived there for 27 years and I never saw it as my home. And I thought, I could really make this my home and I really love being here. But I was terrified. I was single, I was buying a house out here. And I thought, okay, I'm going to make it a weekend house and my friends and I can come out here and spend the weekend. And, I really thought I was doing the right thing. And I second guessed myself after I bought the place. There were many times I sat on my floor crying, going, I think I've done the worst thing in my life. I've made the worst investment possible. No one's ever going to come visit me. And it was completely not true. Everyone comes to visit now, and it makes me so happy when they do come to visit. And I love being here. I love the nature and I love being so close to the national park. And it's inspired me in ways I never thought I'd be inspired to pick up the camera and to get back to making prints again and making cyanotypes, which is this process I love so much. So I made the switch in 2019 full time. I was keeping an apartment in Los Angeles because I still produce photo shoots in LA for the Television Academy. And I was only I was only there maybe, sometimes twice a week, sometimes once a month. And there was no point in keeping an apartment there financially. So I got rid of the apartment. And it seems like I did it just in time. And I love being here. I mean, I'm so grateful every day that I wake up and I get to look outside and I get to see these great Joshua trees and all these little wild animals running around in my backyard.
Mhm.
So,
Let's talk about that cyanotype process. You know what, though, before we do that, let's go back to growing up in San Francisco and what inspired you to become a photographer.
well, I feel really fortunate because I think I got my first camera when I was 7 or 8 years old. It was a 110 camera. My mom
Mm.
bought it for me. And my first roll of film was at the zoo. And I wanted to capture all those wild animals. And I think I still have that first roll of film. And I just knew. I mean, the minute I got into, I think, junior high, and it was an elective to take photography, I took a photography class. In high school, I always took photography classes and I think graphic design. And then in college, I just always knew it was going to be part of my life. And I wanted to work in photography. So after high school, I went to a junior college and tried to get an associate's degree. And I couldn't deal with more English, more math, more social studies. So I went to art school. My mom realized this isn't working for you, is it? I was like, no. So I went to the Academy of Art in San Francisco and decided to study photography. And I went through school wanting to be a photographer and experimenting in all these realms in fashion and portraiture and fine art. And my last quarter of school, I was in a class. I don't remember what the class is, but we had to put together a magazine. And I had to put together a magazine with 5 other people from other disciplines in the school, painters, designers, and graphic designers. And I really enjoyed that. I thought, God, that's amazing. Still get to work with photography. And I didn't even realize this was a job that I could do. So I sort of ditched the portfolio and wanted to stay on the West Coast anyways, and packed up my car and took an internship at a magazine called Detour that was amazing in the 90s. And I interned there until they hired me, basically. And then I worked in entertainment magazines for the past 27 years. So that was the beginning. And then moving out here just inspired me to pick up the camera more. It's like I've been doing stuff for so many other people for so long. It's like I want to do something for myself, and I want to be able to give back to this community by being able to teach people how to do this process.
Can you talk a little bit now about the actual process? And for someone who's listening, the
Yes.
cyanotype, because we're not a visual medium, it's basically the way it comes out in the end is it's blue in various tints of the photograph. So How do you start, kind of start to finish?
Well, it's ultraviolet sensitive solution that you paint onto watercolor paper. You can paint it onto multiple surfaces too. You can paint it onto fabric and onto wood and onto stone and onto a wall. When I was in art school, there was another chemistry called liquid light. Somebody made a photograph on the door of a Volkswagen Bug, which has always stuck in my head. I was like, wow, that means that literally you can make a picture on just about everything.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you can make it on the door of a Volkswagen Bug, you can make a photo anywhere. So I was really interested in this process, and I started experimenting with cyanotypes, which is also known now commercially as sun printing. And you can buy a sun print kit. I buy the straight chemistry and mix it and paint it with a hockey brush and a sponge brush onto watercolor paper. And I do it in subdued light. It's like a fluorescent green liquid, and it's the consistency of water. It's not thick or anything. So you just paint it on, let it dry overnight. I dry it on a watercolor rack or a drying rack. And then the next day, I make a negative on my printer. So it's basically, I'll take a digital file, whether it's from my phone or my camera, which is a 5D Mark IV, and I'll convert the image to black and white. And then I'll invert it in Photoshop into a negative. And then I'll print it on a piece of clear acetate. Think about like those overhead film projectors, remember? So I'll print a negative version of that picture onto a piece of acetate. So I've got this negative that's the size of a sheet of paper. I've got a piece of paper that's got this fluorescent green ultraviolet solution on it. And then I sandwich them together in a frame. And then I put them in the sun for about 8 minutes. That's usually out here in the morning at 10 a.m. I've got this down now after a couple of years. And then I wash it off with water, and I get this beautiful blue and white cyan print. And then I do one more step, which is a hydrogen peroxide solution, which brings it into this more intense indigo. And I love the results. Every time gets me. I mean, it's magic every single time I wash a print. And that's a great thing, to have a little magic in your day making art. So as you know, I just love doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you love sharing it because you have an Airbnb experience that you do if people are interested in learning that, right?
I do. And it's so amazing to see other people experience what I experienced. The first time they rinse off that picture and they see it develop in the water, they're like, wow, this is so cool. How come I've never done this before? Yeah. And it's a really unique experience, and it's so fun to share. It's really, if anything, that's the one thing that really warms my heart about teaching, is being able to share that process with other people. And they walk out of here and they're so excited to like find a frame to frame their prints and to display them at home. And they text me photos of them, in their kitchen or in their bathroom or in their living room of their framed prints. So,
oh my gosh. Now, you have some other photographs, because if you're listening, Rose has some of her work in the Soul Connection shop that I have in downtown Joshua Tree. So if you're around and you want to come and take a look, there's a number of different prints and sizes, framed, unframed, and even some cards. But I also have a couple of your skulls, I guess we could call them. How did the opportunity come to take photographs of a bobcat skull and a empty tortoise shell and those things?
I'm a bit of a hiker. And when I first moved here, I was obsessed with going on every trail in the park and all the different beautiful parks and monuments around here. And I spent some time down in Whitewater, and I'd seen the bighorn sheep down there, and I'd seen them a couple times. And if you see bighorn sheep, it's like you saw a leprechaun.
I saw them the first time I came here, and I haven't seen them since.
Oh my gosh. And right, it's like just so impactful. It just sticks in your mind.
Yeah.
And I was this was after the rat and the snake and the coyote experiences, and I was trying to figure out how I could incorporate them into my artwork. And they're wild animals, so obviously years before I tried to befriend them, and I know I can't befriend them, so no coyote's going to pose for me. So I was fascinated by the remains and Mother Nature and the evolution of life. And when I was in Whitewater, they had quite a skull collection down at the ranger station. So I got talking to one of the rangers. I said, hey, would you mind if I came in one day and photographed all of your skull collection and the tortoiseshell? And they said, no, that'd be great. I said, I'd be happy to give you all prints. And they said, that's fine. So I brought my whole little portable studio down there and spent an afternoon photographing and scanning and documenting the skulls. I think a bat, a coyote skull, a tortoiseshell, and
there's the bobcat, I think.
And the bobcat. Yeah. That's one animal I haven't seen yet. I haven't seen a bobcat.
I've seen that once too. But it was years. And the same with the tortoise. It took a number of years, and it wasn't here in my downtown. I mean, I see coyotes running through that open patch between me and the highway often. The first time I saw one, I'm like, ooh, look at that mangy dog. Oh, that's not a dog. But yeah, it's sometimes pretty elusive, and it has to be like a really quiet and almost a pretty remote part of town, if you will.
Yeah, hopefully someday.
You will. It'll happen.
I see them on Instagram all the time. I'm like, you're so lucky.
Right.
You're so lucky.
Yeah.
You know.
So there are other things that you're making besides photography and cyanotypes. You're a candle maker. How did you decide to get into doing that?
Well, I think I like to stay busy. And it started out with a hand bomb, because when I moved out here, I realized that I went from 60% humidity in Los Angeles to like 6% humidity. I was like, my eyes are dry, my skin is dry, my heels are cracking, my hands are cracking. You know, the first summer you spend out here, you are really subjected to hot, dry wind. It's literally like somebody has a hairdryer on you for the whole summer. And people that live in the desert understand. So I was like, I'm sure I could make something, because nothing was working. Like you can buy a lotion, but I wanted something that was natural. And so I started making these hand balms with shea butter and almond oil and coconut oil and beeswax, and adding essential oils. And then I learned about the creosote plant, which is a bush that's out here that the Indians used. And I soaked that in jojoba oil, and I started making a hand balm with that. And then that led to me making other waxy things like candles, which I love, and using scents inspired by the desert. And it's sort of turned into Joshua Tree Desert Rose and all of my products. So it's turned into a little bit of a lifestyle thing, which is my prints and my products and incense and crystal candles. It's just about slowing down a little more. I mean, I think I was running myself ragged in Los Angeles, and coming out here, I just took a little more time to think about the things that were most important. It's hiking, being in nature, enjoying a good meditation session, and the smells and all that fun stuff.
Yeah. The sunrises and sunsets.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, like no place else in the world.
And
no place else.
When you were talking about how when you watch people's reaction to what they're developing through that cyanotype process, I immediately thought of, I did one of the 10-day silent meditation through the Vipassana Center here. And people come in to Joshua Tree to have that experience. It was December. So in the evenings, you know, we would come out about, 4:30, and the sun is setting. And it was amazing to watch people walk out of the location and just look at the sky, and it would just stop them in their tracks. And I just loved watching them experience what we get to experience all the time. It's pretty
100%. I mean, it's really exciting. I remember being with some friends at the outdoor concert series, that Mon Petit Mojave, and the sky just put on a show like nobody's business. And, you know, like when that happens, it's like, wow. I mean, even we've seen it 100 times. I mean, I have a candle called Pink Desert Sky because it's mind blowing. I don't know why it's mind blowing. And it's so much more mind blowing here than it is in the low desert or 60 miles away.
Right. And I feel like it's still a very communal process for all of us who live here, which is evidenced by everyone you follow on Instagram, when that happens, there's a million photos from all of your neighbors and your community of what's going on in the
I
sky, or
love it.
oh my gosh, I saw that, yeah, 10 minutes ago, or oh, look how it changed, or yeah, which is that's a really beautiful experience, just to have, we're all in our separate locations, either in North Joshua Tree, South Joshua Tree, Morongo Valley, but we're all sharing in that daily experience. So that's really cool.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
really, it is fun to watch. And it's going on, I think, year 4 now. It's fun to watch the same things that we post, like spring, as soon as those cactus flowers open, like I'm all over that. You
Yeah.
know, I'm taking my walks in the morning and I'm practically in people's yards with my phone. I'm sure they think I'm a little crazy, or, you know, somebody trespassing on their property. And no, it's just me.
Yeah.
I just want a picture of your
Right.
cactus flower.
It's so great. Yeah. And you can tell, even if you're inside, sometimes you just get out of the corner of your eye and you're like, I need to go outside right now. Something is happening.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the greatest feeling in the world.
Mhm.
I mean, I haven't been to the park in like almost 2 weeks, which I feel like today's the day that I just need to get in the car and take a drive through and see what's happening, because I feel like I'm missing the blooms in the park. And some of the Joshua trees have been in bloom right now, and I don't want to miss that. So,
No.
yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on and taking the time today, because I know you're a busy lady. But before I let you go, we're going to do that Diary Unlocked thing where we pick a couple of random questions for you to answer for my Patreon supporters. So if you're listening and you're not familiar with the Diary Unlocked, I will ask Rose 4 questions here, and then those answers will be available as exclusive content to Patreon supporters of the podcast. If you're interested in becoming a Patreon supporter of Desert Lady Diaries, go to desertladydiaries.com and click on the support tab to learn how you can become a patron. So the questions Rose is going to answer are: what are your top 3 favorite pizza toppings? That's super random. Since coming to the desert, what have you been surprised to discover about yourself? What's a mistake you've made that you've learned the most from? And 2 pieces of advice for someone moving to the desert. So again, if you want to hear Rose's answers to those questions, go to desertladydiaries.com, click on the support page, and become a patron of the podcast. Where can folks find your photography? Where's the best place to go?
Instagram would probably be the best place. And I post the most on Joshua Tree Desert Rose, and then just my photography on Rose Cefalu Photo.
Awesome. Thanks again for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
If you don't want to miss an episode of this podcast, you don't have to. Subscribe on your favorite listening platform. It's free to subscribe, or sign up for the new episode newsletter. It will only come to your mailbox when there's a new episode to share. To sign up, go to desertladydiaries.com and click on newsletter. Thanks so much for listening.